Good evening, everyone. We welcome you all to Ortho TV Online Monday Motivation. And to introduce today's speaker and the topic, I hand over to Dr. Tushar Agarwal.
Hi guys, am I visible and audible?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening to all of you and welcome once again to Monday Motivation. Speaker, okay, so Kartik Sharma, I should tell you how I sort of heard about him, right? So I read first the Dear Drivers, second first book which he had written way earlier, Quest of the Sparrows, and
Dr. Tushar,
he's an alumnus from, yeah.
your voice is breaking up for me. Is it for everyone as well or just me?
It's breaking. It's breaking.
Can you switch off your video for a minute and then you speak? So probably,
Now are we good?
Yeah,
No,
better.
it's still breaking.
Anyway, chalo, sorry, we'll go over to Kartik fast, but I'll just let you know. He's an ex-alumnus of IIT and again, IIT Delhi and IIM Hyderabad. So that's a huge academic background that he carries. And he has a work background of investment banking, strategy consulting, and currently he works in the public health sector. He is being welcomed by us and he is going to speak to us from Switzerland. He's in Switzerland and he's joined by his family, author of both the books, that's his father. So we welcome all, I welcome everybody on the panel, and over to you, Kartik.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Tushar. Am I audible?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So I'll just start with a brief introduction to myself and also by thanking all of you for inviting me. And I know I've been seeing the other speakers on this forum so far. So I'm really happy and privileged to be part of this super elite group. I'm not sure I've done enough to be here, but thank you so much for having me nevertheless. So just about me, I grew up in Delhi. I spent the first broadly 20 years of my life in Delhi. I'm from West Delhi. That's where my grandparents are both doctors. My father is an engineer from Delhi College of Engineering. My mother is M Pharma. She's done her master's in pharmacology. And then it's basically like a very middle class upbringing, surrounded by very well educated people. So education was always a really big part of my life. And everybody always emphasized on the importance of doing that. But at the same time, I feel a bit blessed because I was encouraged to try out several things when I was growing up. So I dabbled in painting a little bit, music, dancing, and then did not really enjoy these pursuits too much. So ended up gravitating a lot towards sports, where I played cricket for Sonnet Club in Delhi, where I was in the under 12 team for this club and played with Shikhar Dhawan over there, who was my contemporary at that point in time. So, and then I skated at a national level. So I was Delhi state champion in skating while growing up, and then gave that up when I sort of had a life experience, which I'll talk to in a bit. But I just wanted to say that it's basically from my really early days when I was growing up and in very formative years of my life, my father always used to guide me and say his go-to philosophy for everything was that think about it from a first principle perspective. And that sort of really struck a chord with me. And that's where like my being a non-conformist, my being somebody who challenges the status quo and it does not readily accept something that's being told to us or something that's being given as a universal truth. That's something that I don't accept on face value. I go to the core of it, root of it, try and understand why this is a best practice or why we should be behaving this way. And simple things, right? Like the teachers in school would say, early risers and will do better in life. And then it wasn't for me. I realized I'm much more productive at night. So I was a night bird all my life. So I would just challenge, experiment, look at things, gather personal data through my experiences, and then decide what works best for me. And that's, again, always going back to that first principle concept. If you don't understand the root cause or the reason for something, don't accept it as what I was taught to believe in all my life. When I was about 15 years old, I had an um, like some sort of a psychological episode. I don't know what it was exactly, but I felt really sick and I couldn't eat anything. And it got, basically my muscles started atrophying. This went on for over a month, so about 4 weeks or so. Nothing very serious, but I just couldn't do sports the way I was doing up until then. And then that sort of allowed me a window to really start focusing on academics. Before that, I was really mischievous. I would not study. I would barely do my homework. I got really bad grades. All the teachers were really upset in school with me. But after that, it's sort of like that was a, like, I would say, a life changing period of 4 to 5 weeks in my life, where again my parents were both deeply into meditation, and they introduced me to that, and it sort of saved my life at that point in time. I don't know how much longer that could have gone on, but simply because I started meditating, and again, very form based meditation using mantras, and in the beginning, and then towards the end of like maybe 5 or 6 years of practicing that, would I basically got to a point where I did not need that form based meditation anymore. I was able to be thoughtless and for extended periods of time. So it's really difficult for an average person, even for me now. Even a minute of thoughtlessness, even 2 seconds of thoughtlessness, for example, is like really, really difficult to achieve. And I would be in that state for several minutes, 10 minutes at a time sometimes. And that's something that really allowed me to go very deep within myself. I think in hindsight, that's what I credit that period for. And that's where like I found a lot of my, I would say, inner muscle to be able to do things that I was very passionate about always, but probably never had the confidence or never felt passionate enough to execute my dreams or things that I always wanted to do. So when I like took this like a deep dive within myself, that's where I found the courage or the perseverance to really follow my heart. And that's when I was preparing for my joint entrance exam. And around that age is when you typically start. And I cleared that exam. I got into IIT and also started writing at the same time. So I wrote a lot of science fiction short stories, and again, inspired by my dad, who used to write a lot of these when I was growing up. Uh, and then I won a few awards, and that's when I realized that this is something that I'm good at, and this is something that I really enjoy doing. So I kept that sort of passion and pursuit of spirits, to so to speak, alive within me since that early age up until now. I'm really, really passionate about writing, and that's something that again happened when I was meditating a lot, and I got this opportunity. Uh, Fortunately, unfortunate in life, but that's where basically a very formative period of my life, which I wanted to touch upon. And then yeah, so my passion for studies and education basically was very different from what I ended up doing in my life. So I growing up, like my dad, he worked for Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, and he was an engineer with them. So he was really good at fixing cars, and he was very good at like electrics and fixing stuff around the house, etc. And that's something that really fascinated me, because mostly you would see people calling somebody to do these things, and he would just like open the water motor or the refrigerator or a radio. He'll just open it up and try and fix it, sometimes fail, but mostly he would do a good job. So that's something that really fascinated me, and that's what I wanted. My vision of what an engineer does was formed by looking at him around the house doing these things. But as luck would have it, I got rank that I got, and I did not get selected for electrical or mechanical engineering. I ended up pursuing chemical engineering at IIT Delhi. And I was really disillusioned at first, and very disenchanted, I would say, with the entire experience, because I was doing strange things, which, like designing electrical refineries, was a part of what was taught to us. And that's something that like I never thought this is what engineers do, and it was a bit like it put me off a little bit for my first semester. I got a really bad grade at the end of my first semester, but then I sort of again went deep into myself in the winter break that we got in that after the first semester, and I asked myself, what am I doing? What's my role here in at this stage in my life? Is I can't change my circumstances, but what can I do? What is it that I'm supposed to do? What's my thrust at this point in my life? So I again sort of like double down. I tried to like chemical engineering. I started liking it a lot gradually, and I did really well. I ended up in the top 3 of my department by the time things got over at IIT. Got sort of very passionate about that entire space, but I graduated in 2009, and that's when the entire financial uh, the collapse had happened. Basically, the recession had hit, and my job offer from a really big oil and gas sector consulting company was rescinded. And I was fortunate enough. I never wanted to do an MBA. It was not my it was never a primary goal for me. But I wrote that exam anticipating that these things are very uncertain at the time when I was graduating. So I just wrote the exam, and I fortunately got through IIM Ahmedabad. And it's at that point again, like as soon as I entered the campus, I realized, what am I doing? I wanted to be an engineer. This is courses in human resources, like there are these observational psychology courses, marketing courses, right up front ethics and compliance and all those paraphernalia of management that you get taught. And I was like, this is not for me. I'm a numbers guy. I'm analytical. Why am I learning all of this stuff? And then again, after that initial period of disillusionment, I decided to double down again. I went into myself. I decided to double down again, and started liking what I was learning. I just tried to adapt and fix it. So I just like, why I'm saying all this is that we like to believe that a large part of our life is under our control, and we shape it the way we shape it, doing the things that we do. But I realized really early in my life that the only thing that's in my control is uh, how I perceive what's happening to me. That's actually the only thing that's under my control. And I sort of have been, I wouldn't say I've been successful, but I've been really conscious of making that effort every day, where I try to accept what's happening to me and try to enjoy it as far as possible. And that allows me to do well or better than I would if I was disgruntled or disillusioned. And it does happen. And I think I take a lot longer than most people would to recover from that sense of disillusionment. But once I do, I really like throw myself into whatever I'm working on, and it's just my passion that drives me after that. And that's how I've ended up accomplishing whatever I've accomplished in my life so far. So again, in IIT, when I was writing these science fiction short stories and won some awards, I decided that what is really important for me is that I wanted to write one novel. I just wanted to write that one novel that was basically like an embodiment of whatever I have learned during my the phase in which I was meditating. And it really, what that period did for me was basically help me really identify the things that are important and things that are not. So like this pursuit of running after success, which is so strange, right? Like it's not a core concept. It's not something that you can really define that this is what success means. It means so many different things to every single individual. It may mean many different things at any given point in time. So it's like I for me, it became like a defining period in my life where I realized that I'm never going to chase money, and I'm never going to chase like a bigger rank or a higher post in a company. I just realized that I need to evaluate what I do against the impact that it has in anybody's life. And that's something that became a big part of me growing up. And it was very different from how my peers were talking about things at that point in time, which is again a big part of why I was disillusioned in this space. I ended up making great friends. You end up gravitating towards people who think like you, whose thoughts and conversations resonate with your own. But I did gravitate. I made great friends who also believe in similar things eventually. But it's a process of trial and error, right? It's a big batch of 500 in both places, and it's difficult to find these people. It takes time to do that. It's not the most natural of processes. But yeah, like in the beginning, I was when I got into IIM Ahmedabad, for example, I was being told that, like, for me, it was like I have arrived at what seemed like the zenith even like 2 months ago. Back in, like, let's say January 2009, getting into IIM Ahmedabad would have seemed like that's almost it, right? Like, it's my struggles are over. But over there, I was being told that to aspire for a job that in which you work from just 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock and during the day is like the biggest disservice you can do to the college, the seat, all the money that the government is spending on you, etc. And you really need to like go into these international investment banks and work like 18 hours a day, 100-hour weeks. And that's something that was really strange for me, because like, to say that something that pays, let's say, 12 to 15 lakhs per year was considered like not a good starting salary. And for like me coming from IIT, that was like a lot already. So just like how things change at different stages is something that I find really weird and really like a very man-made concept, like, for lack of a better word or a phrase for defining it. It's such a man-made construct that I had basically decided not to accept that as a metric for evaluating myself. I decided to use the metric of impact. And that's when I was working in investment banking. It was like the best job you could have gotten from campus, basically. But uh, like, it happened to me rather than me choosing it. It's like you apply for all the companies that are coming to campus, and they shortlist you. If they like you, they do your interview. If they like you, they pick you. And that's how I ended up in an investment bank rather than choosing to be there. I didn't know anything. I hadn't worked a day in my life at that point. But yeah, like, when I was working there, I spent 1.5 years there. I was making good money, but I just realized that it's, what am I doing? How does it add any value to anybody's life or to the world, right? And then um, that's when I started thinking that it's probably like not something that works for me. Even though, like, I picked up a lot of hard skills. I learned a lot of finance. I learned a lot of like Excel, PowerPoints, great core skills to have and possess. But then if I'm doing a deal for an alcoholic beverages company and a promoter in India trying to sell a part of his business to a liquor baron in South Africa, I don't know what I did. I don't know what good it did in the world. And at the end of it, and even though like we celebrated, it was a proud moment for the company, and I was part of the team. We got Coal India listed. I was a part of the team that did the IPO for Coal India. So yeah, generating money, you are helping something, but it's just not very fundamental to how I assess myself. And that's when I decided to take the plunge and start working in the social development sector. So I just gave that up. I moved back to Delhi. This was in Bombay. So then I moved back to Delhi and I decided to try something different. And that's when I found that there's this job at an NGO, which allows me to use my analytical skill set and do things like uh, basically, which is what I was saying before the recording started. So I'll say it for the benefit of the audience as well, that my role now at the public health consulting work that I do, my role is to make sure that there's dignity of quality healthcare access for everybody, especially the lower socioeconomic strata who depend on government funding and government aid to access those basic healthcare. So making sure that quality tests and quality results and quality drugs based on those results are available to everybody, things that we take for granted and things that we would always assume that we will have access to, our parents will have access to, our kids will have access to. Uh, 80% of India doesn't have access to that. So that's something that I feel really passionate about, and it's trying to fix a real world problem. And there is immediate impact. And that's something that resonates really well with me. I can sleep better. I can, even though if I don't make as much money as I used to, but that's something that becomes like a really important metric for me evaluating my own life. So just to take a step back then and speak about my writing in this entire construct and my life's journey. So the Quest of the Sparrows basically happened at a time when I was disillusioned at IIM. So I wrote it in my second year during my time at my MBA class. And it was based on, like, it was a reaction to the conversation that was happening all around me, which was that we are being trained to slog for the rest of our lives. We have to get into a top tier company, get into the top tier of that top tier company, move abroad at some point and be in the top tier of a top tier of a top tier. So I don't like, that's not something that really resonated with me, because it's not like, that's not a silver bullet for happiness. And that's something that I realized very early in my life. So what is what I was trying to answer. What is the purpose of human life and our existence? What are we here for? And what is worth pursuing and what's not? And it's an attempt. It's philosophical in that regard. It's fiction, it's fast paced, there's drama that happens, but it's basically trying to answer all of these questions that I think at some point we've all struggled with. And I used to be up all night, and I would attend my classes during the day and be up all night, and I would write this book basically. And then of course, it's a lot of it is based on the life experiences that me and my dad had. So we would write some portions, exchange it with each other, and then in the end it would just not be very apparent who wrote what, when, and why. But it just like came together as a very neat story, with where you can't make out that it's basically a work of two authors. And that's something that was, when I read the final draft, I was just like, I was on cloud nine. And for me, that was a goal in itself, to write something and to finish it. That was a goal in itself. And I was pleasantly surprised when I submitted it to publishers. The CEO of Rupa Publications at that point reached out to me and my dad, and he said, I love this book, and I'm going to make sure that, I know this is not going to make any money for either you or me, but I'm going to make sure that this comes out in the world, and I'm going to personally see to it. And to receive that call from somebody like him is just like, it's an amazing feat. And at that point in time, I had this dilemma. Once my book got published, it had a good initial response. Critical response was good in the beginning, and that's when I had this dilemma, that should I give up my job and just focus on writing full time? Is that something that's worthwhile? Is that something that I would enjoy? um, it was a mix of, like, in hindsight, it was the right decision to not leave my job, because now I find, even, I would say, almost an equal amount of meaning in what I do at my job. And at that point, I was at the bank and I was not seeing that meaning come through. But I am glad that I persisted and I tried to find something that gives me meaning. And the only reason why I think that's important is because I feel like I'm standing on two legs now, right? Like this, if I have a bad writing day, I something good might happen at my job. If I have a bad day at work, I can still come home and I can write something. So I just it's otherwise I just feel like it's good for my emotional health and mental health. And I'm not standing on a single leg and a single pillar and focusing my entire identity, or like making my entire identity dependent on one single thing. And it's that's something that's played out well for me, and it's allowed me to do both. And like, for I've been fortunate enough to be able to find balance. I've taken breaks. I normally take my 2 week vacation and I just sit at home and write. That's when I wrote the second novel. But it's something that, like, I feel glad that I didn't do. And it was a lot of it was, to be honest, was because of fear, because I didn't know whether I'll make any money. I didn't know whether this is something that's going to be, whether I'm going to be financially independent doing just writing. Because it took me a while to realize that, like, it takes a long time for money to start coming in from books, and it's not an instant thing, especially because now we authors are competing with Netflix and Amazon Prime and these other media where people are finding sources of entertainment. So yeah, it's yeah, I wouldn't say it's we do the books are doing really well, and that gives us a lot of happiness and joy to both me and dad. But it's not something that's happened overnight. It's my the Quest of the Sparrows was published 10 years ago, and the Daydreamers came out about 2 years back, 2.5 years back now. And yeah, hopefully I'm working on my third book, and actually finished my third book, and I'm working on my fourth book now. And I can speak to that during the Q&A as well after my initial talk. But yeah, that's and then their dreamers basically happened in the phase of life where I was making a switch from banking to public health. And the that's what the story is about effectively. It's of course fictionalized and it's dramatized and it's made entertaining, but the underlying philosophical message is exactly that. Like, you don't fight every single battle that the world throws at you. You have to choose your battles. And just because you ended up doing something or like ended up in a certain situation doesn't mean you need to run that race or like be prove to the world that you're really good at running that race. If your heart's somewhere else, follow your heart, and follow your passions, and do justice to that as well. And I was actually talking to my team at my NGO, and I was telling them that they're all superheroes because the only job of a superhero is to save lives. And that's what they were doing every day by the work that they were doing in public health in my team. And that's where the genesis of the book happened in my brain, to say that what about like a startup of superheroes, because they're supposed to save lives. And that's where the book was born. So it starts with my time at the investment bank. So it's very experiential in that sense, very autobiographical in the initial part, and then a fictionalized account of what I did once I left the bank. So yeah, that's my long introduction, and I'm happy to take any questions. But I did just want to say that also that I didn't cover this, but like a big part of my quest is also like the sense of optimism, that I can make things happen. I can make good things happen if I have a vision, if I can align smart people with my vision, we can make great things happen. And that's what keeps me going, because the work in public health is really slow, as you might be able to imagine, working with ministries and the bureaucracy that's involved in my job every day. It's painstakingly slow at some times to from an idea that comes to me to see that being implemented may take somewhere between 2 to 3 years on an average. So to have that sense of optimism is a big source of energy for me. And I really believe that anybody in the world can be cynical. It's the easiest thing to do. It's hard to remain optimistic in the face of everything that happens to us. And that takes bravery. It takes an ability to be vulnerable. And I really applaud everyone who I see as an optimist and somebody who believes things can go well. And yeah, just to close it off, I would say that I moved to Switzerland very recently. And the idea behind the move was largely to see again, I'd built so many layers in my life. I realized that I was really, really comfortable. I didn't do anything. There was help for every single thing at home, and I didn't have to bother myself for anything at all. Just go to work, do my job, come back home, write my books, and it's just getting very comfortable in that space. So I decided to shake things up a little bit and try something new. And this move has been really, really difficult. It's just like the whole administrative process of this move is really, really taxing. I'm still in the middle of it, but I'm really enjoying it. And I'm looking forward with a lot of enthusiasm at a new decluttered life, which will hopefully start early next year, I'm guessing.
Thank you, Kartik. Thank you for this detailed, introduction. Gives us an insight into your mind and into what you've been thinking when you started writing your books and on your philosophies as well. So I've made a list of questions for you,
Wow.
but we'll go slow and steady. I want to, your a lot of your work in the recent times has been about uh, seeing whether the drugs which are needed by people get distributed properly to the right places. Uh, Now we are in a COVID pandemic presently, and everybody is in a race to get the vaccine out, and then people are already planning about distributing the vaccine, who gets it first, how does that happen? So I wanted to know what your thoughts are on this. First of all, regarding the distribution, what do you think, what the challenges would be, and uh, especially regarding the vaccine, how we should be distributing this?
Right. So I haven't worked a lot on the vaccines side of things. So there's basically the public health space is divided into these three large buckets. So diagnostics, drugs, and vaccines. So my primary focus has always been diagnostics. I've worked intensely on HIV drugs, but not so much more for other disease areas. And then vaccines, I haven't forayed into it. Also, my understanding of the space is limited to what I've read from secondary media releases, and I follow WHO's guidelines very closely as well. So, but yeah, I do think it's the need of the hour to return the economy back to like some semblance of normality to get past this crisis. We won't be able to do that without a vaccine. I'm not sure how efficacious the vaccine will be, simply because the virus seems to be mutating really fast. And that's not something that I'm not sure if that's something that vaccine will be capable of addressing. But yeah, I do think the plan out there right now that WHO has come up with is really good to start with the more vulnerable sections of the populations, and sort of like while the youngsters are out in the world getting infected, building this some sense of herd immunity, which is again like a big risk. It's a big risk that we are taking, but I think it's still to prioritize the old and the vulnerable and the pregnant women is that's much more critical. And actually, like I've seen a direct impact of this towards the programs on HIV and tuberculosis. So I like people are not, if you have TB, if you have HIV, your immunity is already suppressed.
Yes.
So you at a significantly higher likelihood of getting COVID compared to a normal, average, healthy person of your age. And you're in a socioeconomic strata where nutrition is also not readily accessible. So that's another paralyzing factor for that community. And then if you're not able to access your drugs for HIV and TB, it just like it's a death warrant effectively. And I'm sorry for using a harsh word here, but it's I really think that those communities need to be prioritized. And if masks are uncomfortable, we should bear with it until things improve for the others who need those vaccines. So that's my two
So
cents.
you believe that yeah, masks in your opinion are very useful and help to prevent this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really strange when people don't want to wear masks, and like I've seen that side of the argument as well, and it's not something that I can ever endorse. It's a basic measure, and it's more for like if you are infected, it's more for preventing that spread also, rather than just preventing yourself from a potential infection. That's the whole public health mindset, right? Like you need to complete your drug course even when you've the 2 month intensive treatment for TB, for example. Once you've done, you start feeling better already, you can go back to work. But if you do the next 4 months again, you're basically making sure that you're not transmitting it forward either. So it's that whole public health mentality where you take one for the team, which is the world, right? So
So,
that's
can you draw any parallels about the difficulties in distribution for, say, TB drugs and HIV drugs? What are the main challenges that you have in the drug distribution in these fields?
So it's basically a lot of forecasting related challenges. So because at the point of care where the patients are showing up, those facilities are not equipped to predict the demand. They're not placing the right orders. So at two levels above them. So at a point of care hospital, then there is a district hospital, and then there's a state level machinery. And then at a state level machinery, you're basically doing some back of the envelope calculations to see how much drug you need at a state warehouse level, and then you do a further decentralized distribution. So I have seen drugs being outside these government warehouses in the rains and getting destroyed completely. And those are really expensive drugs funded by donors. uh, and it's just like a colossal waste of resources. So that whole planning infrastructure, and now with CMIS is a Government of India initiative. CMI, it's started back in 2016, I think, but they've only come into like some sort of a execution frame in by 2018. I think they've started operating fairly adequately, and that's fixing a lot of that problem, but only from between the supplier to the state warehouses. So below the state warehouses to the point of care at the primary health centers where patients show up, or district hospitals where patients show up, there's a huge challenge. So I know doctors at district hospitals who go to the state warehouse and they fill their coats, lab coats, and their pant pockets with some medicines, and they carry it to their hospitals because there's no truck that's coming and delivering, because there's no budget allocated for those things. So like this entire supply chain is such a huge problem. And I think like for the vaccines that you were talking about, like I think Gavi is the global alliance for vaccines. They're doing a fairly good job in consolidating the demand across the world and procuring from the suppliers, and then making the country level availability of stock. Once it's at the country level, the deeper distribution is something that's really challenged, especially when it comes to temperature controlled vaccines. And that's where like India has an 80% temperature excursion episode. 80% of the vaccines have one temperature excursion episodes, which means they might just be like a placebo
Effective.
effect. Effectively, it's ineffective. So like fixing those logistics and supply chain challenges for vaccines is like, as an outsider, that's my understanding of what
Will
really
be a
needs to
problem.
be.
Yeah. Yeah. Sir,
And,
Dinesh?
Yeah, yeah.
like, just to that point, also like reason why we were able to eliminate polio was because we had an oral polio vaccine, right? So till the time it was only an injectable, we couldn't do anything. It's only when you made it a lot more accessible and you could start these massive campaigns all over the country, that's when India eliminated polio. So it's going to be tricky. But I don't think from a supply perspective there's any challenge, like in terms of the delivery devices, which are the syringes, and the drug itself. I don't think that's going to be a problem. It's like this decentralized delivery to the patient is going to be a challenge.
Distribution.
Yeah, Kartik, you have studied the psychology, the human psychology very well, and particularly the two diseases, HIV and the AIDS, where you say that the patients they don't complete the treatment, which is very common. So the same thing which we are also observing for the COVID or like this situation where people are not wearing mask. So I have a question that why we consider ourselves intelligent people and why intelligent people they don't understand their own benefit and they behave in a very different way. So what is your understanding about the human psychology for such phenomena?
That's a great question. So, like my one of my really good friends, and he also went to the same institutes I did. He's also here in Geneva, and like there's recently another third phase of lockdown that was announced. It's effective tomorrow, and he's so deeply frustrated that he can't go out to restaurants and he can't go and play badminton in the evenings, which he really enjoys doing. And for him, it's like the biggest sacrifice ever. And it's that's where I think. Like we may be intelligent, but we are also a species with, I would say, the maximum amount of inertia. So like our the difficulty in adapting to a change in your circumstances just because you're used to a certain way of life is is just phenomenally difficult for us to overcome. Couple that with our genetic limitation of not procreating as much as a bacteria or a virus would, right? And that allows them so many more chances to mutate. I really think as a species, the bacteria and the viruses are far more intelligent than human beings. At an individual level, of course, human beings are far superior. But it's just this inability to come together as a community and work in the best interest of ensuring survival of everybody, right? Like we've been at each other's throat for no reason at all, right? Like just because somebody's black or somebody's homosexual, we made their lives miserable and as a community, and that's not what one bacteria would do to another, right? Like they would make sure they are facilitating and helping the growth of other pathogens. So to me it's like a battle that we will lose if we don't come together as a community, and more so in the context of also antimicrobial resistance, which I've been studying a lot on. So COVID is it's a pandemic. It's much more in our face today, but AMR has been the antimicrobial resistance has been happening in the background for so many years. It's a slow and gradual process. The most of the frontline drugs are not working anymore. So they're like 29 drugs that were tried on a patient in the US, and none of them worked, and she died. So that it's a real threat, and the numbers are like 10 million deaths annually by 2050 if we don't do anything today. And then even then, with all of this data, great work done by the guy, Goldman Sachs analyst who came up with the BRICS terminology, Lord Jim O'Neill. He's the one who ran all this projections and forecasting on antimicrobial resistance in the UK, and he did the whole projection for the world. Even after that, there's no funding available in the international community to respond to this crisis today, just because it's too far away. Similar, I would say, apathy towards climate change, right? Like we've pressed a self-destruct button on our species, and we are like, the next generation will take care of it. Let me not make any compromises. I'll still drive that petrol car, and I don't care. I won't pay more for a solar cell electricity. So we just like very happily pressed a self-destruct button, and yeah, it may be a little bit of a pessimistic attitude, but I really think that if we come together as a species in a timely manner and anticipate these challenges, we have the intelligence to be able to do that and we don't need to reproduce so that like the next generation has a like adapts to a bad air quality somehow with some genetic changes in their lungs. We are not going to get that chance as a species. So, but we have the brain power and the intellect to solve this problem. But yeah, like I've been reading reports that say it's already too late. But so I don't know. I'm not an expert on the matter, but it's I really think that there were people shouting and hoarse 30 years ago about climate change, and nobody paid any attention. Myself included, I had no knowledge of this until maybe a little kid, Greta, comes along and starts shouting, and then you hear because Twitter, right? Like, so it's, yeah, sorry, long answer to the question, but I just think that I'm really optimistic in individual humans' capability, but an ability to change and make a positive impact in the world. But I am a bit worried on the willingness to do that as a group, as a community, as an entire species.
Uh, uh, I would like to ask the next question to your dad. Mr. Ravi, can you unmute yourself and start your video if possible?
I'm not sure he's in a position to do that. So there's like a lot of work going on at home.
Okay, no
But
problem. Okay, then let me ask you a question, which is a bit personal, or if you are comfortable, then only you can answer that. I have read that Amazon is making a big change in the writing industry. Like it has a lot of effect on the new writers, or like the way they are like taking up the business of promoting the books. So, how do you see the future of writers? Because if you don't have a support of Amazon, then it's very difficult for a person to publish a book or to popularize the book. So if you are comfortable, then only you can answer this question.
absolutely, yeah. So I'm glad you asked this question because like I'm not kidding. Like 2 years back, uh, both me and dad, and we used to talk about this a lot, and we were so jaded with this entire process because it's becoming a money driven industry. Like if you're a rich person who writes a book, you'll be a best-selling author. It's a given. And it's the amount of money you're pouring into self promotion, and it's just like it's not what romantics do, right? It's what businessmen do. So me and my dad, we are both romantics, and we'll write for the love of writing. So like for me, it was never about material success. It was never about making sure that 100,000 people have read my book and I start making money from that. It was writing for me has been a journey in catharsis. I write because it helps me think better. It helps me move on. It helps me structure my thoughts and like put in a very neat way everything that I have thought about and felt, as opposed to carrying these jumbled ideas in my head, which ultimately get tangled, and then you end up being confused, not very articulate, not very clear in what you want to do next, how you think about life. So for me, it's a way to just give a perspective to my life, and I feel really happy when people read it and they say good things. I feel really happy when people say bad things also, because that means they read it. And so there's this editor in Hindu who read my first book, and he called me and he said, this is the worst book I could have ever read in my life, or something like that, like very extreme reaction. And he said, but you are a young boy, so I will not give you a bad review. So I will just write some generic things. And I wanted to ask you a few questions, and I responded to those questions, and he reported on that. He didn't give me a bad review, but he didn't give a good review either. Very kind of him. But then he said that your characters lack motivation. They don't have flesh and bone. But I'm actually made notes. I was in my office when he called me. I went downstairs. I borrowed a notebook and a pen, and I took notes because and I think that really helped me because it was such strong criticism that it becomes you can't ignore it after a point. So then I made an extra effort to, and there are like 8 characters in my next book, which are all principal lead characters. And I tried to give them a voice, a body, of character motivation of like they started growing. And then it was 7 years after that call. So, but I don't know how much of it I can credit to that, but there's definitely in those 7 years that stayed with me. I was thinking about that feedback all the time. So yeah, I just think that uh, yeah, like that's why I write. That's why I enjoy that process of doing it better every time I do it. But for my dad, like who's like been writing for many years, had different aspirations and dream attached to it. But like our discussions were very rich in that context, and I love him for this. That even at his age, he has that adaptability. He overcame that mental barrier through our discussions, and he was able to sort of see the point that you don't write for success, you don't write for fame, you don't write for like being a best-selling author or a million copy seller or anything. We have those aspirations. It's not to say we don't, but that's not the primary goal. The primary goal is to write and be present and show up and write what we want to write about. So that's something that motivates us. But yeah, to your question, I would say I think it's a necessary evil if we don't adapt. Amazon made us who we are. Like our books are selling on Amazon exclusively at this point. I think like no bookstores had them after the first 3 months, maybe. They just took them out because they're not Chetan Bhagat's books. So I can be equally jaded on that front and say that's also purchased, right? Like they purchase the retail section. So it gives opportunities to newcomers, and I actually benefited from a lot of that. So I do see your point. I agree with you, and I hate the fact that the bookstores are dying. It's the place where I found a lot of peace surfing through various books, and I found a lot of books which I would never find on Amazon. How would I? I now rely a lot more on recommendations of other people, and I know what to look for. I go there and I buy it. But I do think it has removed a lot of barriers for fresh authors. It has probably affected the quality overall of the kind of books that are reaching us. So we need to be a lot more careful in selecting what we pick up to read. But yeah, it's a mixed bag like everything in the world, and it's up to us to make the best of it, I think.
Yeah, great point, Kartik. You got to adapt. You got to use what's in front of you and go ahead. Now, you in your talk, you've been telling about how you have been disillusioned by, people who have too much of ambition, people who want to, or your expectations from yourself about being too ambitious, getting it. But at the same time, we all of us are not very happy in just being contented. And I think if you would be just contented with where you are and what you're doing, then maybe you wouldn't grow. So, what is the actual balance? How do you get that balance between a feeling of contentment towards ambition, where you want to get better, higher, stronger, faster?
Yeah. So again, like this is again something that I have thought about a lot because I ended up one day defining myself as a non-ambitious person. But then my friends corrected me, and my wife, who is my truth keeper and my true north, she corrected me and she says, "You're not ambitious. You are probably one of the most ambitious people in the world, but my ambition is somewhere else. It's not about the the regular constructs that we are familiar with, right? Like who has the biggest house, who drives a Jaguar, who has a penthouse, where did you vacation, did you fly business class? I have no answers to these questions, and I don't want to have a conversation like that ever in my life. But it's for so if that is what, so that's why I'm also again a bit wary of nouns and adjectives and labels that are we ascribe to people. So if you make a verb out of it and you say, just instead of a noun, let's use a verb and say what matters to me. What matters to me is impact. What matters to me is helping people, and it allows me allows my ambition to be less toxic than what it could have otherwise been. Like if I'm chasing money, if I'm chasing material success, which basically means doing better than somebody else. Right now I'm relying on all of us doing better, and I love that. It's just like so much freedom. I can be relaxed. My job is to make sure everybody does their job well, rather than my job being to make sure I do my job better than everybody else. That's the difference between a toxic ambition and an ambition for a greater good. And I think I'm adequately ambitious, and I think that's where people need to find that balance and find your joy and peace in the process rather than the outcome. So to be able to de-link happiness from an outcome and find happiness in a process, that's the biggest learning in my life. If I became unhappy. I've written my second book got rejected by six different publication houses. And at that point, I could have been really dejected. And because an outcome of 2 years of labor alongside my job was a failure, I had a bad product, and I was dejected. I was disappointed. But then I regrouped and I rewrote the entire book and I resubmitted and I got published. So like it's not the process of writing, and those characters lived in my head and they were like, we need to get out, you need to make us get out, so you need to rewrite, and if you need to rewrite and find some time to do that, do it. So the happiness and the peace that I find in writing a book, and even if it's rewriting the whole book, it's just so much better than the joy of like getting a mail from Rupa that says, we're publishing you. It's a logical end. That's all it is. It's a logical end that gives us momentary joy and pleasure. It's a high or spike, like a drug induced spike would be, and then there's a crash that follows, and in that crash we need to figure out, that's inevitable, that crash is inevitable, like sugar, like once you eat it and then you have a sugar crash. So you need to use those troughs when you're crashing to find the subject matter that really moves you, that you feel passionate about, and then use that to do the next great thing. And it's in that entire process, when you're getting happier, when you're getting sadder to when you're down in the dumps, that entire process, if you start enjoying as a uninvolved third party to your own life, that's where I think the true happiness is, not in like achieving something, but in the process of trying to achieve something. That's why.
Great point. So, finding joy in the process is a really good point that you made. Dhiren sir.
Yeah, Karthik, at a very young age, you have learned one important message that success, the material success, does not bring us to the happiness. So, very few people have that idea or that understanding. So, what do you think, what incidents, what advice given by your family members is responsible for this idea that success is not leading us to the happiness?
uh, I think it's just like, if any of us actually just look back at our life, there are moments that you can clearly classify as moments of success. And for me, those have always been bittersweet. So like when I found out that I got into IIT, I was upset because I did not get as good a rank as I had wanted. So like I imagined myself in a parallel universe. I had to go to a cyber cafe. We didn't have internet back home then. And I can imagine a parallel universe in which I go into that cyber cafe. I know exactly where that cyber cafe is, and I log in and I say I did not get in. And how much more sadder I would have been, and how much more happiness I can have. And then a parallel universe in which, let's say, I get rank 10, I would have been on top of the world. So like it's this ability to imagine the spectrum of what could have happened, and identifying what has happened is just one of like an infinite number of things that could have potentially happened. And then realizing that, okay, fine, now this is where I am, and now this becomes the new point A. What's my point B? Now let's figure that out. So the problem, I think, was maybe when I was very young, we were told that, oh, just like study for another 6 months and then you sorted, just like do this thing and then you sorted, and then you can just chill in the entire summer break. And then summer break comes and you realize that everybody's solving that entire maths RD Sharma book, and now you have to do it too. And then you're like, oh shit, my summer vacation is all gone, I've been studying so hard, now to study harder. So I think it's just like, I just look back at any given point in time, when you look back at your life, you realize that anytime you've been happy is when you've been doing something that gives you meaning, that gives you growth, that gives you a challenge to pursue, rather than like arriving at a point and saying, oh, I got 95 marks in maths and I topped the class. That will, next day it's over, it's the next semester, it's, you have to work hard again. So it's that day you enjoy a lot, of course, like, and it's totally worth celebrating. That's what you've been working hard towards, and if you fail, you fail, and there's something to learn from that as well. And I failed my fair share. So yeah, it's just, I think it's probably just having an ability to really introspect, and with the benefit of hindsight, really look at everything that happened and not focus on those, like only those moments where you had a chemical high because of achieving something, and also focus on the crash that happened inevitably after that and what actually went into achieving. So maybe it's just like I maybe introspect a lot more, which is why I realized this when I was 23. Perhaps, like, I don't know. I find it hard to answer, but yeah, I that's what I believe.
Yeah. Satyan, please.
Karthik, you have been, had the opportunity to earn much more money, uh, and you have, of course, left it for to do something which you would enjoy rather than, of course, money comes on its own. But now, how do you look at money, and what should a human being look at money as? Is it just something that you should just go on accumulating, or you just look at it as a thing to get stuff and to live? What is the best way to look at it so that you are happy with what you're doing?
That's a great question, and I have an extensive blog on this. I write on Medium as well, and I welcome you to check out the blog as well. But like very quickly, what I discovered was that when I was young, there's this saying, right? Like any penny left in the bank at the time of your death is work that you shouldn't have done, is hard work that you shouldn't have done, or something like that. And I was so intrigued by it, and like these cliches, like they're around for a reason, right? Like they're so catchy, and you start thinking about them, and it influences your life. uh but yeah, like I realized that once I started earning, I realized you can spend any amount of money. There is no, like, if I'm dying tomorrow, whatever I have, I can just blow it on a massive vacation on a big, in a big bungalow or whatever, right? Like, or I can like buy an island with my massive savings if I'm Bill Gates, and then donate it to my kids. Like, there is no end to how much money you can spend. So it's the that's when I flipped the question and I said, how much do I need? And then when you think about the question, how much money do you need? All you need to do is look at how your current lifestyle, and if there is something that you think you're doing in excess, do you want to cut it out? If there's something that you think you should be doing better, do you want to add it? And then figure out what your monthly expense rate needs to be, and then calculate an amount that you need to go for the rest of your life. So I've actually done a geometric progression and a calculation. I've built an Excel, and I have a formula on my Medium blog where I've calculated the amount of money that you really need, and you can just it's all in variable, so you can input the values that you like for your own life, like whatsoever is your monthly expense rate and what lifestyle you're comfortable with, and you come up with a figure, and that's the money that you need. Once you have it, you really don't need to worry about anything in life. And so it's just about learning to get by with as little as possible. And then that, like, I attained financial independence at an age of 28. Since I've been 28 years old, I have had enough money to go on for the rest of my life. Um, because I can really shrink my lifestyle into something that does not need like anything at all from anybody, and I can survive on that much. And I'm really happy. All I need is a probably a new laptop every few years, so don't need to write. But apart from that, it's just like that lifestyle is very, if you're comfortable with that. Like, I've slept on the floor. I don't mind doing that even now, and I enjoy that sometimes, actually. And it's, what do you eat, where do you eat, and like, so what we do is we confuse or conflate the idea of security and luxury. We conflate these two ideas because at some point, so my dad used to say when I was a kid, like, we didn't have a car for many years, and when we were getting one, my dad was like, I'm looking at a car that brings me from point A to point B. That's the function of a car in my life. When I grew up, I was looking to buy a car, and I said, I need a car that goes from point A to point B safely. So I added one layer. So what, and then let's define safely. Seat belts, airbags, crash testing, and all of that adds up, right? Like, it's you're adding several layers already within that idea of safety. And then you go from a car that can potentially cost you 3 lakhs to a car that costed me 10 lakhs. And then if I conflate that with some other ideas, I can get to a car worth 80 lakhs. And I won't feel any qualms about it. That's a nice Mercedes. Like, why not? But why do I need that? What is it adding in my life? Can I quantify that value? And if not, is it pure luxury? Is it a need to show off and prove that I have arrived and I'm better? And once, like, you ask these 7 questions to yourself. Why? 7 whys. If you arrive at an answer that makes sense to you, you're doing the right thing. If you cannot answer the 7 whys, so why 80 lakhs? Why luxury? Why this comfort is necessary, etc., etc., etc. So you'll realize by the time you've answered 7 whys, you've gone to the core of the issue. And just need to be honest with yourself and not be careful that you're not conflating these ideas. So like that, I have a retirement calculator basically, and it's unlike a typical retirement calculators that these finance agencies will give you because they have different agendas. So mine is very basic, and you can just plug in some numbers on what return you're expecting on your investments, what's the inflation in the country where you live, what's your monthly expense, and some basic information like that, and then you can arrive at a figure that you can get by. So yeah, just keep it simple basically. And of course, like every penny I make, every penny I've made since I was 28 years old is I'm not throwing it away. I'm not burning it. It's still accumulating, but it's not something that drives me at all anymore. I can just give up my life in India, come to Switzerland, and I know I'll figure it out. I can't dip into the kitty. I can't start dipping into that money. So whatever, if I'm earning enough to sustain my life here, that's perfect. If I make anything more than I need for sustenance, that goes into my savings. Maybe adds a few square meters into my next apartment eventually that I'll rent. But yeah, that's basically my philosophy on money.
Do you consider like the extra money to like donate or use it for some other people
Yeah,
service, what we call it?
yeah. So my life is basically that. I work in social development sector. I work with an NGO. So I think I what I do is give a lot more than just money to solve a problem and trust. Giving money to somebody else requires you to trust them to put it to good use. I decided to be in a position where I was channeling the money coming in from all these large donors like Global Fund, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID, PEPFAR, etc., and then put it to the best possible use. And I sort of am a part of that machinery. I'm a small part of a big machinery, but that's a position where I'm in. So I decided to give my time and my life energy to a cause at the cost of earning a lot more money and probably donating some portion of that to people I may or may not trust. So that's my response to donation. I think your time and your energy is far more valuable than your money. But if your time and energy are not available and they are already earmarked to some other things that you're passionate about, then of course that's the least you can do.
Yeah. Tushar.
So if I may jump in, audible now?
Yeah.
Hello,
Yeah, hi, Dr.
am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
So fine. So I think we had some great set of questions and even great set of answers. Actually, should appreciate.
I think the issue is with your headphone.
Then why don't let Satyan conclude today's session?
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So, Kartik, thank you very much. We've had good discussions today and a lot of take-home points as well. I really liked your point, which you said about using feedback. I mean, when you got your first rejection about your book, is that you did not get disheartened, but you used that feedback to get better, get work on that, and get into a stronger position. Similarly, whenever you had these issues of you were disillusioned with what you were doing and you're not happy with your work, you again doubled down. You thought, okay, what am I doing? Get back to it and see how you can improve. So as MS Dhoni says, you control the controllables and did not worry about the rest and just got on with it. You talked about adapting to the new world, you adapting to Amazon, and the influence that it has had. And you've talked about the process, the finding joy in the process of achieving rather than the actual achievement itself. So as we say, life is something that happens to you while you're busy making your plans. So you've got to enjoy the view, enjoy the journey as well. So I thank you a lot for coming for this Monday Motivation program. I'm sure our regular viewers have enjoyed this discussion a lot, and you've given a different perspective altogether about your philosophy on a lot of things. We will be putting up links to your books, which are available in case people want to go ahead and get some more insights as well. And I thank all our panelists here, Sir, Dhiren Sir, Tushar, Neeraj, for being here and contributing to this discussion. And most importantly, I thank our viewers who are now coming in the thousands to view this Monday motivation program, and we are growing by leaps and bounds with every week. Thanks to all of you for being there with us, and I hope that we see you for the next week's program as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye bye.
Yeah.
Bye,
Bye
Kartik.
bye.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.